Displays. How do you do those displays? This seems to be the most frequent question in the comments under my videos. So let me show you how it's done. Before we dive into making displays, I think we should discuss why I made the displays, or why you should make the displays. I think Mark has expressed my position on home automation quite spot on. I always think about use cases. I like to do things that improve my life, that make it more comfortable. For example, they save energy or make it easier. What I'd like to avoid is, to make it more difficult, that I have to search for things to turn on the lights. Suppose it has to do with the wife approval factor, which is pretty good criteria to qualify things. Like someone commented in one of the videos that he has no switches anymore, he replaced them by dashboards. I don't like that. I think the switches work pretty well in most situations, but I'd like to improve them. Like this scenario I didn't show you when I was doing the video about the lights. I have programmed the switch in the dining area, so when I quickly turn it off and on again, it will turn on the dining scene. So it will turn off all the lights in the house and except the light in the dining area. And I have few more examples like that. And the same thing for the displays. I used to have the thermometers to show me the outside temperature. And I have replaced them by sensors connected to Home Assistant. So I can check the history and I can automate things like the heating or the irrigation or the blades. But they make it more difficult to just quickly check the temperature. What is the temperature outside? Shall I take the jacket or umbrella if you want to go outside without taking necessarily my phone out or running to computer to check the website? So what I did is I made this little display and I put it in the place where the thermometer was. And now it shows the temperature outside, but also the temperature inside and temperature in the pool and the weather forecast. So it's easy to use as it was before, but it gives me more information, more value. Same thing with the irrigation control. I can definitely control it from my phone or from my tablet. But when I'm out there in the garden, I want to be able to check it out directly without pulling my phone out. And then I have this little display by the entrance door that most of you like. I always wanted to have something that I can check the status of the house before I leave. If all the lights are off, and if they are not, can I just push the display and turn them off? Are all the windows closed? And before I leave, shall I perhaps take the trash out because it's the collection day today? And how much time do I have before the bus is going to leave? And when I get home, before I change, shall I go outside to check the mailbox because maybe I have a new mail? Sure, I could have installed tablets and have dashboards. That would be an alternative, especially for this entrance door. But I decided for those small displays because they are small, cheap and easy to use. Because all the Nextion display needs is 4 wires. It's a 5 volts, ground, TX and RX. And I have those switches in here and they have a Sonoff Basic in them. And each Sonoff Basic, they have 5 volts, ground, TX and RX. So all I needed to do is to design the HMI layout, and I'll show you in a second how it's done. Then connect the display to the Sonoff Basic, add a few lines of code in the ESP Home that I use to control the Sonoff Basic, and then mount it. I have printed this little frame which looks very similar to those switches on the 3D printer, so I just put it next to that and it'll actually look pretty neat. It will look like it came from the switch manufacturer. So now that I explained myself, let me show you how it's done. Now for the connectivity, I already explained it. 5 volts to 5 volts, ground to ground, TX to RX, RX to TX. That's easy. But before we connect the displays, we need to make the HMI template and load it to the displays. So let's get to it. To design the HMI layout, what you need to do is you need to download the Nextion editor. You can do it from the Nextion website. Go to download Nextion editor, and here you can download the installation file or the zip file. I prefer the zip file because I can just drop it on my desktop and I don't have to install it. So you download it, you run it, and you start with creating a new layout. So you do File, New, and then a name. I will call it Test, and I already have Test, so I will say I would like to replace it. Now, very important part is you have to select what type of display do you have. It's very important that you create layout specifically for the display you have. So there's two parameters. That's the size of the display, the resolution, and the type of the display. There is three types: basic, advanced, and intelligent. You can recognize them by the part numbers. So basic, they have T in here. Advanced, they have K. And intelligent, they have P. So I have the basic, and I have the smallest one, so the 2.4-inch display. So the resolution is 240 by 320. So I will go in here and select that one. And the next thing I need to do is I will have to select the orientation. So I do it here in display. So is my display vertical or horizontal, or is it flipped? So I say it's a horizontal, 90 degrees. I will select character encoding and I will hit OK, and it will create the template for the display. Now, I'm not gonna turn this video into a tutorial about how to use Nextion editor. If you're interested in that, you can search for Nextion editor, and there are some videos on YouTube on how to use that. But I'll give you about 6 hints that will allow you to start and design some basic interface to be used for Home Assistant. So how this thing works is you have this toolbox where you can put different elements in here in the layout. So you can create pictures. So here I have created picture, and here there are some parameter of the picture. See, it's a blank box. There is no picture yet. So if I want to display actual picture, what I need to do is I need to upload picture in here. So I go in this panel here, I say plus. I select an image, so I will select this mailbox, for example. And then I need to reference this picture in this tool, in this object. And I'll do that by, this one has ID 0, so I will say it's picture ID 0, or I can browse and select it in here. And once I do it, the picture will be displayed. The same thing with text. So I'll create new object. It's gonna be text. And there is the text value, new text. But it doesn't show anything yet because the display, it's not a computer. It doesn't have fonts or anything. So if you want to display some text, we need to upload some fonts into the displays, the fonts that we would like to use. To create the fonts, you go to Tools, Font Generator, and in here you can select any fonts available on your computer, and you select the size of the font, and you can also select a range of characters. You give it a name and you generate a file. Once you do that, you will upload it in here. So I have a few fonts in here, so I will upload this Calibrate 32, which I have already generated. And once you do that, you reference this font in this object. So it's already referenced because 0 is there by default. So I have font ID 0, and here's the text. So if I change this, it will change the content of the box. And this is how we will actually interact with the display from within the ESP Home. So we can change the text property of this object. So this is object ID 2, and it has a text property AAA. So we can change that, and by doing that we will display different text. There is 3 types of objects for text. So there's text, there is a number, and there is a floating point number, so that you pick up the object that you would like to work with. Generally, if you would like to display number, it's easier than rendering it as a text. For the images, there is 2 things you could do with the image. You can hide it or display it. So this is how I display those icons, like the mailbox picture, by just deciding whether it should be visible or hidden. The other thing what you could do with picture is you can change the picture ID from the ESP Home. So I use that, for example, for the weather forecast. Let me show it to you. I'm going to close this one and I'm going to open the display I have for the entrance, and there is one with a forecast. So I have the image in here, and there is a blank picture. So I have a picture 23. So what I do from the ESP Home, I have those different IDs here, you know, ID 3, 4, 5 and so on, and I will set the ID of the picture to the weather icon that I would like to show. So this is how you work with text and with the images. For the fonts, I showed you how you can generate the fonts, and once you do that, you just select the font ID. Because it's a rather low resolution display, my suggestion is to use some readable fonts, some sans serif fonts. If you're gonna have a table of values, then consider using monospace fonts, because then they're gonna be all aligned, all the digits are gonna be aligned one under the other. For the time, I have used this segment display font, and this is my personal choice, you don't have to do it. But the reason I did that is, if you look at the segment display, you kind of know it's time, because segment displays are traditionally used to display time. So when you look at it, you know right away what you're looking at. So I think by now you know what you can do with the Nextion editor. You can do lots of things, but it's not very easy. You know, it's not easy to do layout, change fonts, draw some lines, pictures, boxes. So one piece of advice I'd like to give to you is, what I always do is I start with a picture background. So I have those backgrounds in here. So there is one background for the weather forecast, where I drawn those icons that are always there. They're static, they don't move, they're always visible, as well as this, you know, C character. There is no need to create it as a text box and render it as a font. So what I did is I created this TIFF file 320 by 240, which is the resolution of the display. I created this image in Photoshop, or you can use GIMP, and I created this basic layout for the display in there, and I just load it as an image stretched over the whole display. And I did the same for the entrance door. So I draw some line here, I draw some text that is always there, and I start with that. And then I put the text or image elements on top of that. Then what you need to do is you need to write down the IDs of those elements that you're going to be changing, because you're going to be using them in the ESP Home. The last piece of advice I'd like to give to you is you can change any object, any text or any picture into a button. When you select it, you just click in here, Send Component ID, and I will show you how we configure it in the ESP Home. Because even the cheapest display is touch sensitive, so when you click on this bulb, in this case, it will generate an event and send the component ID 2 in this case, and we will catch it from ESP Home, and we will create an event to turn off the lights in this case. And if you don't have such an image, or if you would like to create an area across multiple objects, you can always do is you can create a hotspot, and you can resize this hotspot and then click on Send Component ID. And what it will do is it will create a button as well. In this case, this button will have ID 18. Now, one more thing I haven't mentioned, you may have noticed that there is 3 pages, because what you can do is in the display you can create different pages, and you can change them and flip through the pages, either based on a button or based on a timer. And this is how I made the temperature display, so it changes between the current temperatures and the weather forecast. So there's 2 different layouts, and it switches between the 2 every, I think, 3 seconds or so. So once you're done with your design, I would save it so you can get back to it later on. And then you need to compile it and upload it to the display. And I was already showing this to you in the video about irrigation, so let me show it to you again. So all I need to do is to connect the display to the computer using FTDI adapter. So again, ground to ground, 5 volts to 5 volts, RX to TX, TX to RX, and then plug in the USB, compile, and upload. Now we have the interface design, the HMI layout. And what we need to do now is to control the content, the displayed values. And we will configure that in the ESP Home. ESP Home is an add-on to Home Assistant. So if you use Supervised Home Assistant, you will find it in the add-on store. And once you install it, it comes with a dashboard UI where you can add and configure your devices. Now, I'm not gonna explain it from scratch how to use ESP Home, because what I have done is I have created a configuration for the display and I uploaded that onto my GitHub. So if you go to github.com/Berksy70 and then go to Home Assistant ESP Home Weather Station, it contains the 3D models of the displays and the HMI definition as well. And it also contains the YAML file that is the configuration for the ESP Home. So I'm gonna use that to explain you how it's configured. The ESP Homes has a documentation page. So I'll refer to that because it contains a description of all the things I'm gonna be using. Specifically, we're gonna be using the display component. There is a component for the Nextion. And the way this works is the ESP Home will create a firmware for the Sonoff Basic. So this code will run on the Sonoff Basic that will have the display connected through the serial interface, and it will communicate to the display. And the ESP Home also uses a Home Assistant API to talk back to the Home Assistant. So we'll essentially make an interface between the Home Assistant and the display. So let me explain you how it works. So there's a generic part of the ESP Home. So there's a name, you configure the platform, what it is, and then your Wi-Fi configuration, which you typically have saved in the secrets, and API. This is the connection to the Home Assistant. Very important part that we need to do is we need to disable the serial logger, because by default what the ESP Home does, it'll send a log information to the serial interface, and we need to disable it because we use this serial interface for communication with the display. So it's very important to say logger baud rate 0, this will disable it, and then we will configure the interface. So I'm using pins D1 and D2, and then there's a speed which is 9.6K. So that's the configuration of the board. Then we have the then there is some information which we pulling from Home Assistant. So I create a sensor. Platform is Home Assistant, meaning talk to Home Assistant, ask him for those entities, and query entity ID sensor sun elevation. So I'm going to be using this particular one to determine the brightness of the display. Have it less bright in the evening, more bright during the day. Then I'm looking at the temperature inside, temperature outside, temperature in the pool, and so on. So I'm querying number of Home Assistant sensors from the Sonoff Basic, and I'm gonna be displaying this information on the display. I also have this sensor time, so I'm using this to show the time of the day. Then I have one more sensor from Home Assistant, which is not a sensor but binary sensor, and this is to tell me if someone is home. Because what I did is when nobody is home, I just turn off the display. Then I have some global variables. I use that for switching the pages, so I regularly flip from one page to the other. So this is what those variables are used for. I'm gonna show you in a bit. And then the final and main part is the display. So you can refer to this example in here in the ESP Home display configuration. It's using something called Lambda, and what it means is it essentially uses a C code so you can send commands to the display. And it's very easy. I'm going to start from middle. So here what it says is it says IT, so this is the display object, and I'm telling him go to page forecast. So there is two pages, forecast and temperature. So I'm going to one page or the other based on the value of this variable that I'm changing here at the end. So I'm switching it every 5 seconds. And then the actual displaying of the information is done by this command IT, again the object of the display, set component text, and I'm using formatted text. I'm setting text of the object with the ID min-max. So this is the object that shows minimal and maximal temperature. Then there is a formatting string, so I'm using a float number with 0 decimal points. And I have two values in here, so it's the today minimal state and today maximal state. So these are the values I'm pulling from the Home Assistant, the two sensors. Same thing I'm doing with the rain. So if there is no rain, I'm just displaying dash. If there is rain, I'm showing the millimeters of the rain. Then I'm showing the time. So again, the same method, set component text printf. And as you saw, there is two objects, one for the hour and one for the minute. So this was for the forecast. If I'm on the second page, I'm showing the current temperatures. So I'm showing the temperature inside, temperature outside, and temperature in the pool. Again, from those objects pulled from the Home Assistant. And I'm displaying those with 1 decimal number. One thing I skipped was the image. So there is a different command. It doesn't say component text printf, but there is a send command printf. So I'm sending this command to change the ID of the image for the weather forecast. And that's basically how it's done. There is few other things. Here I'm checking whether the sun elevation is greater than 0. So it's during the day when the sun is up. So I'm sending brightness to 100, and at night I'm sending brightness to 50. So I'm doing it in here. And if nobody is home, I'm actually setting brightness to 0. So I'm effectively turning off the display and I'm not bothering to set those values. This is the code for the weather station that doesn't have the touchscreen buttons. So let me show you those. So this is the actual configuration of my ESP Home code for the entrance door display. And it has two more things. One is it has something called text sensor from Home Assistant. And this is a sensor that is actually reading a text value of a sensor as opposed to a numeric value. So this is good to know as well. And finally, there is the binary sensor of platform Nextion. So as you can see, there is the Home Assistant one. We saw them on the weather station as well. Here I'm using it to check the mailbox. And here there is a binary sensor platform Nextion, and here I have the component ID. So this is the ID number 2. If I press it, then it will do something. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm calling Home Assistant service light turn off, and I'm turning off all the lights. And it's all there is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include link to this GitHub page to the description of this video, so you can grab it and you can start from there. And the final piece is the housing for the display. Here I had a fun with 3D printing. I didn't have a 3D printer when I started, but I made a 3D model for the display and I ordered it online, and after a week I got it. It was pretty easy. Now, great thing about Nextion is they have the display faceplates, the 3D models of the display faceplates available for download on their website. So what you could do is you can download those, and you can either take them as a part and build it into your 3D model, or you can just use them because I think they have them including the enclosure. Or you can also measure the display and build the frame from scratch, which is I think what I did for the first display anyhow. But if you don't like 3D printing and all the fuss about it, you don't know how to do 3D modeling, you can also do is you can take any plastic box and just mount the display inside, like I did for the irrigation. I just made a hole in the plastic box and I just screwed that inside. Or you can download the 3D model I put on my GitHub so you can get it from there and you can have exactly the same box like I have for the weather station or for this faceplate. So that was the displays. I hope you find it useful, and if you did, and if you created own displays, I would really love to see them. So please make a picture and send them in the comments under the video, or send it to me by Instagram, because I'm really interested to see what you have done. Okay, that was that, and see you in the next one.